And now, The Mike Miller Show.
Happy Monday. Welcome to The Mike Miller Show on Truth Be Told Media. Hey, Jessica, there was no disclaimer at the beginning of the show. That means I have finally apparently won everyone over on the network, and you, in fact, all do agree with everything I say.
Well, so, we'll make sure to get that fixed in the second hour.
Who knew? That didn't take long. Anyway, yeah, it's Monday. Lots of stuff to talk about today, and we're going to flip the show today. I normally have Michael Hausum on in the second hour. Michael's going to join us in the first hour, and while I'm thinking about it, Nick Adams. I did a segment last week, 11 politically incorrect quotes. Sure to drive liberals crazy. Those are from Nick Adams in his new book, The American Boomerang, How the World's Greatest Turnaround Nation Will Do It Again. I mean, Nick's been all over the place on this book tour. Sat down with Glenn Beck last week, but he's going to be on the show tomorrow. So Michael Hausum today and Nick Adams tomorrow. Looking forward to both of those guys. But first up, Michael Hausum. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Good weekend. Did you have a great weekend?
I did. I spent the weekend up at the lake up in Arrowhead wakeboarding, and I'm as sore as I've ever been in my entire life.
And, you know, for a 55-year-old guy, I mean, you're I'm kidding, of course, but Michael, you got some air under you on that wakeboard. You put a picture on Facebook. I had to ask you if that was really you.
That was really me, and that was one that I stuck the landing, believe it or not. So,
awesome.
That was
awesome. That was completely awesome. I did get a kick out of – now, for those of you who do not follow Michael Hausum on Facebook, I, A, would suggest you do, and B, generally – pictures that Michael takes of his surroundings during his downtime, if you will, generally have his feet in the picture. So I got a kick out of whoever, the woman or whatever, you put I think a night shot, as you were kind of calling it a day, and all she said was, "Where's the feet?" I thought that was funny.
Well, that's right. You know, that's the one with the American flag was in it, and I didn't want to desecrate it, you know?
That's right. That's right. Anyway, as is normally the case, you were a prolific dude over the weekend on IJR, and we have a number of things to talk about today. But I'd like to begin, and obviously the border situation and the VA and everything else, domestic issues, far more press here. But the situation in Israel, and we could probably do a whole show on that sometime. But Bibi Netanyahu, who I've followed for, it's probably 30 years or more. This is a young guy. Was a young guy way before he became prime minister the first time. But I have always admired this dude. He's been up, down, back up. And of course, and I would suspect this is why you admire him as well, or at least partially. He's everything that Barack Obama is not, isn't he?
Exactly.
He's the guy's convicted, he's principled, he's bold, he's decisive, he's no nonsense. He's a leader.
Right. And
at least in my opinion, in what, we used to call the free world, this guy is hands down the strongest player we got,
Right. And given the absolutely nutso crazy cul-de-sac of the world that he lives in, to take the positions that he does and to speak the way he does is just, I just admire him. I have for years and years and years, same as you, of course.
And he's often, not only in his cul-de-sac, as you call it, but in the world. Particularly the UN. The UN has passed more resolutions of condemnation of Israel in its history, in Israel's history, in the UN's history, than all other entities combined, including terrorist organizations, countries, states. So he is often the only guy on the planet who he stands alone. So anyway, take us. We have a clip from yesterday, but kind of take us into this, and then we'll talk a little bit about it after.
Yeah, the context was he was with Brit Hume, and he was talking about the what's going on in Gaza right now. And the, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rockets attacking all over Israel. The fact that their missile defense system is knocking down most of those. And so Hume was just trying to get his perspective on what's going on because, it's very controversial. There are people that are saying that the Palestinians are innocent and it's Israel that's attacking them and then vice versa.
Well, then, of course, also, you see everybody from, NBC, I know it's on the NBC.com site, and I've seen it other places, doing this running count of Palestinian civilian deaths.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's, and that's, what ends up happening is, a bunch of rockets go into Israel, and then when the Israelis respond, then everybody freaks out after that. It's interesting. We can talk about this after we talk about the article in the clip. But after putting this up, and I also put up last night a clip of some folks standing up on the hills in Gaza, cheering and chanting Allahu Akbar, watching rockets go from Gaza into Israel. The result of that on my Twitter feed there's been more response to these two things on Twitter than anything else I've done by far.
Wow. And your Twitter feed is, for those who want to follow you?
Thank you for asking. At MP House, MPHAUS.
Perfect. All right. Should we listen?
Yeah, let's do it. Go ahead.
Well, first let me say what the mission is. Our mission is to restore a sustainable quiet, sustainable security to our people by seriously degrading Hamas and other terrorist groups' capabilities in Gaza. I think we're proceeding there. We'll continue until that goal is achieved.
How much of it is achieved, sir, in your judgment so far?
Well, I'll leave that to the discussions of our inner cabinet and our general staff, but I think the important thing to understand is that we can't enable our population to be under continuous rocket fire. I just want your viewers to imagine the United States being bombarded, not in one city or two cities, but in every city between New York and Colorado. Maybe 20% of the United States would be exempt for this. 80% of your citizens would have to be in bomb shelters or ready to go into bomb shelters within a minute to a minute and a half max. No country can accept that. We can't accept that, and we'll take the necessary action to stop it.
There seems to be very little disagreement about that here in this country, Mr. Prime Minister, but obviously there's concern that a conflict like this can have unintended consequences. And people, I think, are wondering whether you're nearer the beginning of this offensive or nearer the end of it. Can you give us an assessment of that?
Well, whether we're at the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, I'm not going to tell you that right now because we face a very, very brutal terrorist enemy. Here's the difference between us. We're using missile defense to protect our civilians, and they're using their civilians to protect their missiles. That's basically the difference. They're embedding these rockets that they're firing wholesale into our cities, terrorist rocketing, trying to kill as many as they can. They're not succeeding because of two reasons. One is because we've developed this incredible missile defense system, which I think is a historic development in the history of defensive warfare. With U.S. help, and I want to thank the American people, President Obama, the U.S. Congress for helping us fund this amazing development. But the other reason we're succeeding, you have to understand, some of the rockets do pierce through this shield. And the reason we're succeeding is also because we're targeting the rocketeers. The rocketeers are firing from homes. These homes are actually command posts of the Hamas and Islamic Jihad army. So that's where they have their secure communications, weapon caches, rockets, hidden map rooms, and so on. These are their command posts. Obviously, we're not going to give them immunity, and so we have to attack them, and we're trying to minimize, as we can, civilian casualties. But with this kind of enemy, we'll take whatever necessary means that we need to take. I tell you, Britt, We try surgical action. We're not indiscriminate. It's very tough. There are always going to be civilian casualties, which we regret. But we have to defend our people, and that's what we'll do.
You know, Michael, the notable line when I first heard this was the difference between us and Hamas is we use missiles to protect our people, and they use people to protect their missiles.
Oh, yeah. There's a meme that I put up. I think I tweeted it and put it on Facebook as well. There's a picture of a Palestinian. It says Palestine, and there's a guy on his knees with a rifle behind a little baby carriage, and then next to it is another. It's exactly the same looking, and it says Israel. While on that side, there's a guy on his knee with a gun, and behind him is the baby carriage.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the difference.
It is. And there's a video, I think Zip put it up on Weasel Zippers. That's where I saw it. But it's from, the bombing run thing, the kind of stuff we grew accustomed to seeing from Iraq and Iran or Afghanistan from our own fighters. But at the last minute, the Israeli pilot sees children and calls off the run.
Right. Yeah, there is, as much as there's an attempt to do so, there is no moral equivalence. I mean, yesterday morning, all through Gaza, Israel dropped flyers and pamphlets warning of a pending attack, telling civilians and innocents to get away from Hamas areas, that it was coming. That's exactly the opposite of what the Palestinians did.
Well, and not only that, but then Hamas has now told these people to, quote, stay and defend your homes, as if somehow staying in your home is going to defend said home from an Israeli rocket. And in effect, they being Hamas, want to use dead Palestinians, hopefully children, to politicize this thing against Israel.
Well, sure. It's merely psychological warfare. I mean, the defense being that pictures of whatever that house is with those people in it will be in front of some board at the UN calling for some sort of action against Israel as a result of that.
Yes.
No question.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And you know what I think?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, because this is more conclusive than. Let's continue. What were you going to say?
The other thing that I found very interesting. I mean, we people that aren't. I mean, I've never been to Israel, but you look at the area that it contains and the area that the Palestinians are able to bomb from that little section of Gaza. When Netanyahu put it in the context. Terms of scope and scale for the United States there, I mean, that has to change the perspective from everybody. I mean, if Mexico or Cuba or Bermuda was bombing us and and everybody from New York to Colorado was running into bomb shelters on a moment's notice, and that was the physical percentage of size that we were being attacked, we would not be near as concerned about surgical strikes and collateral damage as people here say we should be. I mean, it would be if something like that happened, even if it were just one day against our country. I mean, our country would be at 85% public support of annihilating. I mean, literally wiping off the map anybody who was doing something like that to us.
There's no question about it. And, excuse me, the Israelis have lived like this for years. And each subsequent attack, now, of course, I mean, they being Hamas, Hezbollah, they lob missiles randomly into Israel all the time. But a major concerted effort like this one, every time it happens, the range of the missiles have been increased, and it's been proved by the Israelis that these long-range missiles that can now hit Tel Aviv, that were last week targeted at the nuclear facility, are being manufactured in Iran. This is a proxy war against Israel by the Iranians.
Yeah, this is not mere geopolitical disagreement over borders. This is a theological effort to destroy an entire race. No question about it.
You're exactly right. And, one of the mistakes we make in this country, and I think, frankly, we make it on both sides of the political aisle, is we tend to ascribe, if you will, logic or desires and results wanted, whatever, to others that we historically and traditionally would have. And by that, I specifically am referring to this nonsense pushed by our left, the whole Palestine thing. And once there's, the two-country solution and all this kind of stuff, then the Palestinians and the Israelis will live happily ever after. That could be no farther from the truth. I'm not sure who said it. It was a long time ago, but we won't rest until we push Israel into the sea. Palestinians, by and large, Muslims by and large, want there to be no Israel. And people, I think, I don't know if they care, but I don't think that's really understood or cared about.
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, there has been those sort of peace agreements on the table that the Palestinians have rejected.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the whole Golan Heights thing, returning the Golan Heights to Syria. I mean, they're called heights for a reason. And I think, and I've not been to Israel either. I'd like to go. I'm not sure that man, you just think about it at any given moment, it might be all over. But the smallness of this country and whom it is surrounded by, it's a pretty scary proposition for them.
Oh yeah, no question. It's I was on doing some research for this. I went to the IDF website, Israeli Defense Fund,
right.
And they have a listing, bar graphs and all that, of the number of rockets that have been launched over the last year, 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever. And if you go back a decade, there's an average of 3 to 4 rockets per day for the last 10 years. Now, obviously, there are periods of time that there are none, offset by, yesterday there was, a couple of hundred. But imagine living in a situation where everyone around you, their official position is they want you gone. And there are attacks that, when you average it out, are every 7 or 8 hours for over a decade. And the idea there is what you're going to do is, remodel your home and give your master bedroom and living room to the guy that's next door trying to encroach upon you, that wants to kill you. I mean,
wants to kill you. Yeah. Well, and even, you go way back. Before the regular schedule, if you will, of missile attacks, rocket attacks, they were blowing up kids on school buses. Just imagine, I often think about America's left, because they pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, if they were forced to live, and this is somewhat to what you were speaking earlier, if they were forced to live under conditions like this, what would their opinions be? And I think the most troubling part of this whole thing, from a global perspective, if you will, is if you look in Paris right now, if you look in Germany, which is particularly troubling, and this morning I read in L.A., there are anti-Semitic protests. Obviously, more violent in Europe right now than in L.A. I think that's been pretty much drive-bys, horns honking, and epitaphs being shouted out. But it's just the whole thing all over again. And maybe it's not all over again. Maybe it's just it never ended. You know what I'm saying? The anti-Semitic thing in the world it's a scary thing.
Oh yeah, especially in Europe. It's definitely more so
Germany.
in Europe right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever read George Gilder's book, The Israel Test?
I did not.
Okay, you've got to read that book. If Israel is at all of interest to you, and his basic point is that your perspective on Israel is a very good test of where you fall on not just geopolitical matters, but economic matters and religious matters and things like that. And because part of it, it's, Gilder's kind of a technological guru, so it's not just political that he's talking about. It's also economic, capitalism, things like that. Super. I mean, it's a couple years old now, but it is an extremely good book.
Well, and as you're saying that, I mean, the light bulb's going off. I mean, you just tick down the causes of the left here. The virulent left, the progressives, as they like to call themselves, which I've always found to be an interesting term for what they believe in. But as you were describing that book, I mean, you just tick down their list of causes, and it makes your point, makes the book's point.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no question about it.
I just, we just a few minutes here, so probably not time to get into another segment. But was watching. I think maybe you and I maybe even talked about it a couple of weeks ago. But the History Channel did although it did abuse a few critical points, but the whole World War I to World War II thing, and the fact that Hitler was finally able to galvanize German public opinion when the stock market crashed in this country. And he blamed it, as we know, on the Jews.
Jews. Yep.
Yeah. So, and what goes around,
super duper convenient scapegoat, that's for sure.
So, I mean, what do you think is going to end? I mean, how do you think this round will end? Some say that, in fact, I've read some stuff out of Israel itself that we have to destroy Hamas this time. And on one hand, I agree with that, because obviously you at least have to destroy their capability to rain rockets on Tel Aviv and nuclear facilities and so forth. But then on the other hand, you get back to this the hearts and mind of the people. It seems to me, and maybe it's twofold. I mean, you obviously have to destroy now, tactically, their ability to attack you. On the other hand, how do we not make the Palestinians want Hamas?
How do we make them not want the bomb?
In other words, Hamas. In other words, how do we, not we even necessarily, but we make Hamas, how can Hamas be made not relevant? In other words, they don't have an audience anymore because their messages doesn't make any difference. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Therein lies the $64,000 question.
Killing them?
Well, yeah, but the cause lives on. It's almost like a cancer, I guess. If you killed everybody that even believed in anything, that they, I don't know. I'm just kind of musing about this whole thing, because it seems like each time they get stomped, they come back, and they come back stronger next time. And of course, with Iran being their benefactor, it's a bad deal, man. It's a very bad deal.
The corollary that immediately comes up in my mind is the vast majority of the world's perspective on what the Third Reich did in the 30s and early 40s. I mean, the percentage of the human population that sees Hitler's final solution as anything other than horrific evil is very small, correct?
Right.
I mean, there's a small contingent of people across the world that would still say that the final solution was right. And some of those people are, even as we speak, trying to engage me on Twitter. Right? But
exactly.
So that's the first thing that comes to mind, is what has happened is they were killed, they were defeated, and the truth came out. The difference is, in the case of Islam, you've got hundreds of millions of people that have that as theological information from God commanding them to do this.
Exactly. Listen, bottom of the hour, let's take a break. I'll be back with Michael Hausum on Truth Be Told Media. Welcome back to the Mike Miller Show on Truth Be Told Media, the new home of Daily Paul Radio as well. Anyway, Michael Hausum is with me. For those of you who may be just turning in, Michael, as you know, is normally on in the second hour, but he is with us now. Welcome back, Michael. Let's get nerdy a little bit, okay?
Let's do it.
All right, brother. So you wrote a post over the weekend.
Right.
About asking people if they feel poor, and where some places are, they may feel poorer, if you will, than others, right?
Right.
Talk to us about that.
Well, the context of the article is, hey, people are feeling poor. They feel like they have less money in their pocket. However, when you look at the inflation rates as measured by the Federal Reserve or the government, they're not showing a lot of inflation. So
exactly.
The media narrative is that prices really aren't going up all that much for the types of things that people buy.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
But what this post had a chart of, like, there's about 12 or 15 things: oil, fuel, gas, eggs, healthcare, ground beef, movie tickets, college tuition, electricity, cars, coffee, natural gas, home prices, postage stamps, and rent. So those are the kinds of things that people buy on a literally minute-by-minute or daily basis, showing the extraordinary increases in price of those things over the past 14 years.
Right. I'm looking at this chart, and some of it's pretty incredible. So, by the way, we need to apologize to the listeners because we were remiss in sending out the handouts to all of you this morning. We have a chart of living expenses from 2000
so people can read along.
Yeah, through 2004 through March of 2014. But anyway, please continue.
Yeah, and the summary of it is that taking a look at that chart and looking at all the things that apply. I mean, I put gas in my car, I eat eggs, I feed my kids ground beef, we go to the movies, I got a kid in college, another one about to go. Electricity is running everything that I'm sitting here doing right now, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things have an extraordinary increase in their price over the last 14 years, dwarfing the inflation percentages that the media, the Federal Reserve, and the government communicate. The reality is that the reason why you feel poorer is because you're spending a lot more money on things that you need and use every day than you used to. It's literally that simple.
It really is. I have to put on my old certified financial planner cap here for a second if you guys would indulge me. But I used to harp to prospective clients and then those that became clients about this very thing year in and year out. Financial planning software would allow us to assume certain inflation rates. The kind of common, there still are two problems with people as it relates to this thing. Number one, we tend to think in terms of today's dollars, like what can we buy today with a dollar? Okay, and again, this chart, which we failed to send out to you guys, goes back to 2000. That's a problem when you're planning for the future. Secondly, and here's a misconception, and I think maybe, Michael, you're hitting the nail on the head with this point, is people tend to think when we just have low to moderate inflation, everything's cool. It's not going to be a big deal. People get freaked out when inflation goes out of control. But, I just remember an old statistic. With moderate inflation, low inflation, we lose half our purchasing power about every 14 to 15 years. And this chart smacks you right upside the head with that very fact.
Right. Well, if you look at, say, ground beef, right? The hamburgers that you're eating today are no different than the ones that you were eating 14 years ago. I buy this bag of frozen hamburgers at Costco. Mm-hmm. that my kids love, and it's like $20 for 18 or 20 different, pre-cut. I don't buy the high-fat one. I buy the one that's the I forget what they call it, but it's like the steak hamburger, right?
Right.
Well, it costs twice as much to purchase that as it did 14 years ago. I mean, the product stays the same, but it's twice as much money to purchase it. And so the things that you're doing and consuming are no different, but it costs you that much more money to acquire those same things. I mean, that is a killer.
It absolutely is. And, looking at this chart, I mean, obviously fuel oil, gas at the top, but then the fourth on the list, eggs. And that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. People buy eggs, they buy eggs, right? And they've gone up 106.2%. From January 2000, 97 cents a dozen to $2 now.
Right. And it's not, $2, not that big a deal. Eggs, and I don't know. When I go to buy eggs, I don't look at the price of the eggs.
Nobody's going to not buy eggs because they've gone up a quarter.
Right. I buy the eggs. Again, I buy them at Costco, and I buy the big, huge bin of it that's got, 12,000 eggs because we go through that many. So I don't think about it like that, but it just takes more of my money. Now, the other part of this that this kind of implies about, and now we get a little bit into Alex Jones conspiracy thinking.
Uh-oh.
A little tiny bit is that the Federal Reserve, with the devaluing of the dollar over time, decreasing its purchasing power is part of the plan.
Reason being?
Reason being that if I borrow $1 today, but 10 years later that dollar is only worth 20 cents, it's easier and cheaper for me to pay it back.
Well, yeah, okay. But of course, one would assume interest and so forth, a long-term loan.
But even the interest on that, that's one of the ways to address the federal debt that we have.
Sure.
Is if the real value of those dollars are less in the future, its corresponding expense to us in the
that's
future
always
is
the
less.
case. Yeah. A 2014 dollar is never going to be worth a $2,000.
Exactly. Yeah. The dollar that you borrowed in 2000 is relatively less expensive on a dollar basis to pay back in 2014. The unfortunate side effect of that is that everything that's not just dollars, that are goods, that are eggs or gasoline or ground beef or everything else, costs more of those dollars to purchase. Right?
Yeah, we're doing a basic economics class here, and I think you and I are loving it.
Right.
And it's something people
what the Fed
should
is doing.
pay attention to, particularly when they're planning for the future.
Why are those dollars being devalued in such a way, do you think, Mike?
Pardon me?
Why do you think they're being devalued? Or do you think, I assert in this article here that that policy is intentional on the part of the Federal Reserve.
And you believe that?
Yeah, I totally do. And I'm kind of informed by Milton Friedman on that, looking at the Federal Reserve. Since the Federal Reserve was put into, if you look at the value of the dollar over the last 200 years, the most significant devaluation of the dollar over that entire period of time was as soon as we had the Federal Reserve in effect.
Right.
Okay, so you're disagreeing with me here. I can feel it.
Well, no, we could just get off into the deep weeds with this, and I'm not sure that we should. But I just this is the I think the key words when you said Alex Jones. This is a bit Alex Jones-ish to me, and even when I see a picture of Mr. Jones, I break out into a rash. So I just
totally. Yeah. And that's the risk of bringing that up. But when you look at now, it's supposed to be ending later this year. The Federal Reserve borrowing from itself, printing dollar bills. It's not accidental that they're printing dollar bills, that they're flooding the marketplace with currency. And I mean, at some level, adding more dollars to the economy is intentional. The only question is why.
See, therein lies my skepticism. Why?
Yeah, and I don't think that they're purposefully inflating the cost of goods. I think it's a matter of short-term thinking to make those dollars available to pay debts. And
yeah, you and I are on exactly the same page as it relates to that. Yeah, right. If that's the objective. So what we're talking about is not necessarily an unintended consequence, but just a natural consequence of flooding the money or flooding the market with money. And I completely agree on that.
I don't think that the Federal Reserve Board is sitting there saying, okay, our goal is 10 years from now, the dollar is going to be worth a third of what it is today. I think they're thinking over the next 60, 90, 100 days. But the consequence of all of those dollars chasing the same amount of goods is that those goods will cost more of those dollars.
Absolutely. Maybe we can touch, because this is somewhat related, on this other post you did, which this thing over 500,000 views. This map that shows, and you and I and Jessica were talking about this during the break. Well, as you and I know, Jessica drove from Florida to Chicago over the weekend and back, but you got over 500,000 views on IJR, and the title of the post is "This Eye-Opening Map Shows the Reason Gas is More Expensive in Some States Than Others."
Right. Yeah, and what it basically did is I got it from a friend on Facebook. It's amazing how much information people send me, which is really fun. And what it does is it breaks down state by state where the taxes go, or what the amounts of taxes are on a gallon of gas, right? Mm-hmm. So for every gallon of gas you purchase, there's a federal tax of just under 20 cents a gallon. And then all the states vary from a low of 12 cents a gallon in Alaska all the way up to 51 cents a gallon in New York.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a little link on that you can go in and click. I couldn't figure out a way to make this map interactive on our site, but if you click on the link, it goes interactive and you can just see whatever state. Like right now in Indiana, the state tax is 18 cents. Other state taxes and fees are 24 cents. So state and federal taxes combined in Indiana, where you live, is 60 cents a gallon, which is only 8 cents a gallon less expensive than crazy California.
Wow, see, I didn't know that. Well, hell, I might as well move to California then.
Yeah, Indiana is, compared to the surrounding states. Illinois is 3 cents cheaper. Kentucky is a dime cheaper. Interesting, Michigan and Indiana are identical.
And one would think that Michigan and Illinois, specifically because of Detroit and Chicago and a couple other areas, would be higher than good old conservative Indiana. So that's pretty interesting.
The one that really blew me away going through to figure it out, I get Alaska being very inexpensive because my assumption would be most of the gas and oil that's used in Alaska is generated in Alaska.
Well, yeah, and Alaskan citizens every year get a check from the state on their share of the profit on Alaskan oil. So, yeah, right. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's the cheapest in the country. The second cheapest in the country in terms of state taxes is New Jersey.
See, that one blew me away when we talked about this during the break. That one absolutely blew me away.
Right. And then the next thing about it that I found interesting is, whenever gas prices go up, man, there are people going nuts about oil company profits and all that kind of thing, right?
Oh, sure.
That they're screwing people and this and that. This to me was, as interesting as it is that Indiana is 60 cents a gallon in taxes, blah, blah, blah. The more interesting thing to me is the breakdown on where that gallon of gas goes, the money. Like right now, as of last week, the average around the country is $3.68 a gallon. right? What's it there? Do you have any idea what's a gallon of gas cost for you right now in Indiana?
I could go down the street a ways and take a couple of turns and buy, let me think, regular, this morning, I had to get up and take my wife to the airport this morning, $3.39.
Oh, wow. So your gas is less expensive than the country average.
Yeah, I mean, right now I could get up tomorrow morning and it could be $3.52 because these guys do this. I used to have when I was a financial planner, when I had my firm, I had a couple of guys who owned gas stations, more than one, each one of them. And this whole thing has, this is a mini tangent here, and I'm sorry, and you guys both know that that's what I do. But these guys, like I just said, I could get up tomorrow morning, it could be $3.52, but not only $3.52 down the street in 2 turns, but I could go almost anywhere in the somewhat immediate proximity, and it would be $3.52 there as well. And I used to rail against these guys, I mean, nicely, because they were my clients and they had a lot of money invested with me. You guys are colluding. This is collusion. And they would swear to a man, no, we're not. Well, then how does this happen? Well, we just get up in the morning and we see that guy's is at whatever, and then we put ours there, and then these guys are. So I don't know. Again, that's a tangent. But that's just something that has always irritated the crap out of me, how it all goes up in the neighborhood and it all goes down, and generally overnight.
Right.
So anyway.
The breakdown, it's on that $3.52 a gallon or so, roughly 10% of that, and California's more, I have to put 91 in my car, but regular I think is just under $4, which is not surprising.
Right.
That California gas is a bit more.
Yeah, okay.
So 10% is refining costs and profits. 10% for transportation, retailing costs and profits, 13% for taxes and fees, and then 2/3 of the price is just for the oil itself.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly, between the entire process of refining oil into gasoline and the profits and everything going into refining, that's a smaller chunk than taxes and fees. And then to get it from the refiner into the retailer, the costs, calculated, your ex-clients, their cost of retailing, plus whatever money they put in their pocket at the end of the month, again, that is also less than the state and federal governments are taking out of every gallon of gas.
Oh, absolutely. And, again, the average neophyte would swear that even the gas station is ripping you off and getting wealthy selling gas. I've had these same guys I just complained about, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but say that they didn't make much money at all on gas. It was the stuff that they sold in the store. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I used to be I used to do mergers and acquisitions, and I represented a guy we didn't end up closing the deal for environmental factors, imagine. But we were going to sell 12 gas stations that he had. Mm-hmm. And the profit margin on that gas for him, so that would be in the retailing side, was about 1.5%.
See, that's about what I suppose I would guess. I was thinking a couple of minutes ago, related, so here we have the government, right? The CAFE standards, the fuel efficiency standards. And it's been a while since in fact, I think I've even written about it a couple of times in the last year or so, couple of years. But this attack, if you will, against, which I think is hilarious in its irony, by the way, but the whole electric car thing. Have you seen that? Because electric cars get far better mileage, if you will, than combustion engines. That annual taxes on electric cars in various states, because of the money that isn't being collected in taxation on the gas that they're not using, if you will. You've seen that, haven't you?
Oh yeah, and it's almost like the same thing if you compare it to cigarettes, that everybody wants to stop smoking and there's all this stuff, but the world is set up to thrive on the funds that are generated from them. So, literally, if what would happen to the economy if everybody went to an electric car when all of those taxes on gasoline went to zero?
Screwed. See? Be careful what you wish for, right?
Yep, exactly.
Let's see here. we have this Black Chicago residents video we could play, or listen, let's play Pick'em. This Hillary's biggest competitor thing. I've talked about Lizzie for a while, and then this new court case that might be bigger than Hobby Lobby. Where do you want to go?
Let's do the Black Citizen one, because I think that's a pretty not only interesting but entertaining, and there's some other things we can talk about for that. Why don't you play that?
Let's play it real quick. Go ahead, Jessica.
He's going to go down as being one of the worst presidents ever.
Today, if you look at the time that we brought here as slaves 400 years ago, we got the same results today.
We live in Beirut somewhere. Ambulance, fire department, police running up and down the street, all around our community.
Oh, my block is always dark. Dark. Even on the sunniest days. I can't go outside and play. On my block.
On my block.
On my block.
On my block.
Do something for our children. Have the same love for these young people like you got for the ones across the border, and you want to save them.
President Barack needs to pay attention to Chicago. If he cannot pay attention to Chicago and the African-American community, he needs to resign.
Here we got a mayor in our city and our president of the United States who have passed legislation and have given up funding to create opportunities for new citizens to come into the United States, ignoring people who've been born and raised here.
With the president setting aside all of these funds for immigrants and forsaking African-American community and African-American families, I think that's a disgrace. And Barack is from the heart of 55th in the city of Chicago. He saw this as a state senator, and he did not pay attention then.
Mr. President, we're asking for you. You're spending billions of dollars in Texas, but we got a problem here in Chicago. We will not stand by this here and keep letting this senseless killing and shooting happening in our community.
Again, as I say, he will probably go down as the worst president ever elected. Bill Clinton was the African-American president.
I mean, I think they should have done kind of like a point-counterpoint thing, and then in rebuttal, they should have brought the Obama phone lady on.
Right.
So, man, Michael, what a difference a couple of years makes, huh?
Yeah. There's a couple of ways to look at this kind of thing. My first response looking at it was, I don't particularly want a president focused on any specific racial or individual group at all.
Of course not.
And
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Get it.
And to a certain extent, that seems to me to be what they're kind of asking for here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that because I got to expect that in Chicago amongst blacks, I don't know, we're talking 98% voting support, perhaps.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's almost nationwide. Yeah.
Right now, if you count in the percentage of people that voted when they were dead or more than that, we might be north of 100% in some places.
Well, yeah, Cook County.
Yeah, exactly. So setting that aside for a second, they make a very legitimate point. Hey, there's stuff going on inside our country that is disastrous, yet billions of dollars are asked to be spent on people that are not residents of our country, that are not citizens. That's a legitimate point, man.
Oh, it absolutely is, and I agree with you 100%. There should be no focus on whether you're white, black, orange, purple, glow in the dark as it relates to this issue. But to your larger point, blacks, all of those other colors, poor whites, Appalachia, there is a point to be made, is there not? That how about we take care of our folk? I tend to agree with these people.
Well, exactly. I mean, the idea is that he's supposed to defend the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't apply to some guy that just came across the Rio Grande.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I put this up, and it was interesting. There were a lot of people that were like, oh, the chickens are coming home to roost, and finally, and, you know, if he's losing the black Chicago community, here's the question. when Hillary runs or Chief Wampum Liz runs.
Pocahontas is my favorite. F-A-U-X, Pocahontas, but yes.
Pocahontas, that's right. How the types of things that these guys are communicating, is that actually going to translate into a difference in the election this fall or the election 2 years from fall? What do you think of that?
No. I think not. I just think this is, and I have railed and preached and written and talked about this for years. It doesn't make any difference. They'll moan and complain, and fill in the blank with they. It's not just blacks. Yet they will dutifully line up and vote Democrat every chance they get.
Right. So what that means to me then is, I mean, we look at this video. This guy put this up. We thought it was great. We thought it was entertaining. We thought it made a lot of good points. If you are a Democratic precinct leader in that area, or you're the state Democratic head for the state of Illinois, or the National Democratic Party, because you know that those votes are going to come in at that level, what you're going to do with these people with this perspective is ignore them. Don't you think?
Oh, they've done it for 50 years and more. Exactly. And they line up again, whether it's busing in the inner cities or whether it's the hate pamphlets against other candidates. I mean, and they year in and year out. That's what they do. Hey, listen, let me ask you a question. We got about a minute here. You and I talked a bit. If you want to hang for an extra 15, you are welcome. If you got to run, we'll let you do that too. So what do you want to do?
You know what, buddy boy? I got to run.
Okay, that's no problem. I just wanted to ask you now before we ran out of time. Listen, it's been, as usual, a great show. It's also been shorter by virtue of the fact that we talk so much about the topics we talk about. But thank you, Michael Howsam. I'll catch up with you next week, my brother.